Hello, and welcome to another edition of BNEWS In Depth. I'm your host, Rich Hosford. This month, we are taking a deep dive into the fascinating world of life sciences. We will do the discussion in three parts. Up first will be my talk with Dr. Ed Weiner, longtime member of the Board of Health, about the safety of modern-day life science companies and their research. After that, we will talk to Millipore Sigma's Vice President of Professional Services, Paul Asmar, about what makes certain municipalities attractive to life science companies. We will end the discussion with a talk with Northeastern Professor Jared Auclair about what is going on currently in life science research and what may be in store for the future. It will be a wide-ranging discussion with lots to talk about. Let's take a look. Hello and welcome back. I'm now joined by Dr. Ed Weiner, the Vice Chair of the Board of Health. We're going to talk about just how his board helps keep everybody safe, despite having all these new and engaging and dynamic companies coming to town. Dr. Weiner, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for letting me be here.
So I just wanted to talk, there's a lot of push right now to get, more life science, in development in Burlington. Can you just sort of talk big picture, how having those types of companies locate here is, in your view, a benefit to the community?
Burlington has had a long history of companies coming to this town. And I use the word companies because we've had problems with some companies coming to Burlington. Whenever I hear about life sciences coming to this town, I'm very happy because these are safe, these are companies that are not what we're used to and what we have seen, companies that in the past have contaminated this community and caused pollution in this community. And I get that a lot, that people say, what do you want a life science company who's going to be using chemicals to come to Burlington? But I can tell you, these are not the companies that came here in 1955, 1959, and we began cleaning up their messes in the late 80s and the early 90s. On the south side of this community, we had companies that were using contamination, materials that contaminated the community. Remember, in 1959 and others that came in 1955, there was no EPA.
Right.
There was no OSHA. These companies came in. They did what they thought was appropriate. Obviously, it wasn't because we're paying the price now for these companies and cleaning up. We've been cleaning up the South Ave area since 1986. We've been cleaning up the other areas around the south part of our community since 1994. These are companies that we think are life science, but they're not, because the life science communities of the 21st century are much different. We have 6 federal organizations like the EPA, OSHA, DEA, the FDA, and 4 state, including Mass DEP and the DPH, and many local agencies like the MWRA, and most important, the local Burlington Board of Health, which does so much to protect this community of what we saw in the past. These are companies who have come to Burlington. The new life science has come to Burlington, and we have them here. We have hospital, we have Leahy Clinic, which does research. We have device companies, catheter companies, which have taken heart disease treatment to the nth degree. We've had biopharmaceutical companies. What we're talking about now are clean, safe organizations with highly educated people who use minute amounts of chemicals, being completely overseen by not only all of the agencies that I talked about, but even the community. All of these companies, especially the rDNA, who use recombinant DNA in their research, have community representation as well as as governmental Board of Health representation on their boards to look at things. We're not talking about the Ebola, the level 4, biologic level 4. We're looking at companies which use non-infectious BL1 and mild disease, BL2, and even some severe organisms, but all of which can be treated if there was an emergency. So we have taken oversight to the highest level, and these are no longer the companies which we may have called biotech in the past.
So do you believe that it's just simply a matter of having the right regulations in place? Is there also a kind of a change within the companies themselves that you've talked to, dealt with? Or is safety to them a part of a checklist to make sure they're in good standing, or is it a goal in and of itself, do you believe?
I think it's a goal in and of itself. These are companies whose leadership are highly trained. These are people who want to be using innovative and novel organisms and chemicals, things that they want to be safe for not only themselves and the people who work there, but also for the Burlington community. They're not interested in causing a problem. They go to the highest levels using huge amounts of money to ensure that they have a clean and a safe environment.
Now, what does it look like on the ground? You know, people, I think, maybe they'll see your meetings and they know that you're out there doing what you do, but maybe they don't know exactly what that means. When a company comes to town, what's the requirements as far as like disclosing to you what the materials are going to use? Do you take tours of them? How does the Board of Health kind of do what the public doesn't see? What are you doing?
It's all of the above. They come, they work with the planning board to find a site, but they need special permits when they come to the Board of Health. If they're using specific methodologies, then they have to come to us. We are a community that has a recombinant DNA law. We have a community which has a hazardous materials bylaw. Years and years ago, more than 30 years ago, to clean up this community and to look forward to see other companies and other industries that could come here in the future, the town meeting placed an environmental engineer within the Board of Health. This person not only oversees all of the cleanup for our past problems, but they also do all kinds of visits to these companies to make sure that they are doing things within our rules, our bylaws, to make sure that they are safe. Our environmental engineer, when somebody new comes to town, is involved in doing the research. What are they doing? What do they need to do? Reviewing all of the methodologies that they're going to be using, and making sure when they bring that information to the Board of Health that we understand them and the community understands what we're doing. And then when we have approvals, there are many times, especially when we get into some of the most advanced methodologies with RNA and DNA, that we have a community representative as well as a Board of Health representative and other representatives within the community who listen to what they're doing and in essence approve what they're going to be doing as they move forward.
And during that process, is there ever a time when, you know, the Board of Health or the environmental engineer kind of looks over the plans and maybe makes, you know, suggestions of how to make things even safer, or makes demands on how things are done or stored, or is it get down to like a back and forth between the two entities? For
the most part, when they come to us, they have reviewed, gone through, and ensured that all federal, state, and local laws and statutes have been made and are correct. We do ask questions just to make sure, especially with some of the new industries that we don't know very much about. We have had companies who have come to town who are using who are using methodologies that no one in the world has used before. We have held up the approval of some of those till we went and investigated. And I and many of my board members have actually gone and visited some of those companies to see what they're talking about. We break ground here in Burlington, but I got to tell you, we're pretty darn conservative, and I'm pretty darn conservative because we have to live here.
Right.
I have to serve here. I've been on the Board of Health for 30 years. I know what we've had to go through to clean up the South Side. I know what we've had to do to make the people in this community feel safe and be safe. So the issue is that is my priority, the priority of the Board of Health and everybody who works for them.
Now, recently, town meeting passed a warrant article with some slight bylaw changes that were going to, make it easier for life sciences to come in. We don't need to go into, parking ratios and all that. But one of the things that came up was a certain classification that maybe people weren't aware of, the biohazard levels. And level 4 was restricted in town. Can you talk about what that is and why you think that might be the right choice, if you agree with it?
Level 4, BL4, is not allowed in Burlington. To define BL4 very simply, those are organisms in which those organisms could cause severe or fatal disease, in which there is no treatment for those diseases and there are no vaccines for those diseases. Where the other BL levels are less of infection, BL4 there is no treatment, no vaccines for them. For example, Ebola virus.
Right.
Ebola virus. There is no Ebola virus treatment or vaccines that we can use right now. Therefore, they would never be allowed in Burlington. So we don't have to worry about that. Even BL level 3, which also in some cases could cause severe illness, there are treatments for them and there are vaccines for them. So where companies may need to use certain organisms in their research, we don't allow the worst of the worst.
Right. Now, you mentioned a few, but I just, we have some companies already here and some looking to come here. Just to give, our viewers some of the sense from what you've seen, working with these companies, what are some of the, more interesting or unique kind of, projects or areas of research that is happening in Burlington today that maybe people aren't aware of?
First and foremost, we have a hospital that does international research. People don't realize that Leahy Clinic is an internationally recognized medical facility that does recognized research. They use all kinds of organisms. They have a recombinant DNA approval in this community. They come before us every year or two to renew that, to tell us what they're doing and to show us how that they meet all of the standards. But there are so many other companies here. We just brought into town or invited into town Millipore, one of the most important companies in biotech in the world that's now here. But we have also device companies that make catheters, that make other types of treatments for heart disease. And we have 14 of these companies already here in Burlington, and all of them meet our standards, are inspected regularly, and come before us many times in the past, and will come many times in the future.
And is there other types of research or things that people are doing in other areas that you would want to see locate to Burlington, or are there alternatively ones that might not be restricted, but are something that you'd want more time to research that you're before inviting them to town or having them?
It's a question. We'd like to have clean biotech in this company, in this community. As I said, they are safe. It's a safe industry. Mm-hmm. They're using minute amounts of chemicals. there's high oversight of these companies. We have never had a problem in Burlington, and I can't think of a problem even in other communities that have had problems with these groups, mainly because of the oversight, mainly because these are highly scientific companies with huge amount of employees who are highly educated. They don't want to be sick. They don't want to have a problem. They don't want to have they don't want a lawsuit. They don't want anything. What they want to do, most of these tech companies, is very simple. They want to do and create and make and market and manufacture medicines and devices and other products will make the community better and to cure disease. So these are good companies. They're not what we thought of in the past with degreaser tanks, with issues with septic systems which contaminated our water, in which we're cleaning up now.
Right, and switching water systems.
And switching water systems. The reason that we're going to go to MWRA water is because these companies in the long past really caused problems within our community. And we're talking different types of industries now than we saw in 1959 and 1955. Those types, which we didn't know better back then.
Sure.
We didn't realize. It's not that those companies were doing things that they thought were bad. We didn't know in those days. It's a matter of, it's a learning curve.
Right. We know now.
We know now, and we're fixing it now. I keep telling everybody, and I got to get this in, the Board of Health has been working for more than 30 years to clean up this community, and we're getting there. Hopefully in my life, I will have helped clean this community up to where it once was, but we're not talking about those situations now.
Right. We're not making future problems in your estimation. This is by the book and with a lot more open eyes than in the past. All right. Well, is there anything, those are the questions that I had, anything that I hadn't touched upon that you think would be interesting for the people at home?
Just that there are so many agencies looking at life sciences. But most of all, this community has a Board of Health, which is highly scientific, with terrific professionals who look at these types of things every day of the week, 365 days a year. And I think that we have a situation here in this community that nobody else has. Right. Nobody else has. And I think that's something that we have to think about and understand that I don't want anything bad to happen to this community. I want to clean this community up. I have to live here. My kids lived here. You have to live here. We want this community to be the leading edge of science, but also a very safe and productive town.
All right. Well, thank you for all you do, and thank you for joining me here today.
Thank you so much.
I really appreciate it. Dr. Ed Weiner, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So there you have it, the safety of modern-day life science companies. We go now to my discussion with Millipore Sigma's Paul Asmar about why they chose to come to Burlington and how having a cluster of similar companies all in one area helps all involved. Let's take a look. And welcome back. I am now joined by Paul Asmar, the head of real estate and property services for Millipore Sigma. Paul, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me today. Appreciate that.
I'm really happy to have you here. As we've been discussing on the show, there's been, there's a push for more life sciences in Burlington, and everybody, whenever the subject comes up, Millipore is always, sort of like the example that everybody gives. This is what we need. This is what we want. So. But what I want to start with is kind of, just for people who maybe hear the name but don't really know much about the company, can you give us a little background about Millipore Sigma, maybe a little bit of its history and some of the things that you guys, work on and do?
Yeah, sure. I'll do the best I can. So the name Millipore has been around for a long time, I believe since the 50s, when the company was established. And in just recently, an acquisition of Sigma Aldrich, I believe in 2014 or 15, we became Millipore Sigma, a very large company that we a lot of times when I talk in terms of facilities and real estate, not in terms of being a scientist. So, but I always like to tell people that at Millipore Sigma, we provide our clients with all the tools, processes that they need to help solve the greatest problems in the world of life science. So that's what we do. Our clients are some of the most well-known and some not so well-known names in life sciences industry.
And you've got places around the world, correct?
Yes, we do.
Give us an overview, like where is Millipore working out of?
So regionally, we have a good region here. We are in Jaffrey, New Hampshire. We have a very large site up in Jaffrey. Of course, we're here in Burlington. You know that.
Yep,
we're in
right
Bedford. We're in Bedford, right down the street in Bedford, and we're up in Danvers. So that's just a local presence that we have.
Yep.
But we have another hub in St. Louis, which was the Sigma Aldrich piece of it. We employ about 2,500 people in that St. Louis hub, which is 8 buildings out there. We are in the West Coast, up in Seattle, down through California, Southern California, Northern California. But we do span across the country and across the globe. So we're also owned by Merck KGaA from Darmstadt, Germany. So they have a huge presence in Germany as well. Plus, I believe we're in 60 or 66 countries of the world.
All right.
Something around there.
So quite a presence all across the world. In the Burlington facility, which is up in what we call the Summit.
Yes.
The ribbon cutting we were just discussing before the interview was a year and a half ago. Time flies.
Can you believe that, huh?
Seems like it was less than that, but that's just our busy days.
Yeah.
When Millipore Sigma was looking at places to open up this new facility, was there anything about Burlington specifically that kind of caught people's attention?
It was a year and a half ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
October of 17, so it has gone by very quickly. And we thank the town of Burlington all the time for their hospitality and the way they worked with us. But I think to take that question a little bit further, this process actually started in 2012.
Oh, okay.
So with what we call a master plan, trying to figure out what we were going to do with all our the properties that we had. And so we started to do a search. We do searches for a variety of ways. We do them purely by regional, where we want to be, how it affects our business, the commercial side of the business, and really the demographics of where people live. So we went through that whole process. At the end of that process, Burlington really became one of those leading candidates for us to be and to have our we always call it the flag in the ground. We wanted to have a good sized flag in the ground, and through conversations with the town of Burlington, selectmen, all the different boards, we really started to realize that it was a great place to be.
Yeah.
We felt that we worked really well with them. Then from an employee side, so I kind of have to balance the business side and the employee side. We looked around and. The amenities are great in Burlington. The restaurants, the shopping really provided, really this kind of a space for our employees and our people to go and to be part of the community from a working environment.
And during the process, what was your experience or the company's experience working with the different boards and departments in town?
Yeah, no, it was great. It was great. I was at town hall. More than a few times for different reasons, everything from the beginning of the concept down right to the very end. We found the boards were excellent to work with. The Board of Selectmen was great to us. The town administrator, John Petrin, was excellent. Worked with them hand in hand every step of the way. Tried to keep everybody informed, and they did likewise to us. We went through a few votes, different types of votes in the town for the building, and it was very favorable. We really appreciated everything that got done. I think the town in general, my opinion is, I think they were happy that we were coming here. I feel that way, at least that's how we feel. And we were very happy to be part of the town and happy to be working with them. We've expanded the relationships in the town with the schools. We've done several things with the schools, and I know some of the school kids come up and I think come and look at the labs and things. And you were there at the grand opening day. We had a lot of grammar school kids came up, so it was really a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Tent set up with
it was really fun.
Activities for the kids.
So I think in general we've had a very good relationship with the town, and they have worked just as hard as we have to try to make it all really well for us here.
And one of the things recently, town meeting just passed a new bylaw that, I don't want to get into the technicalities of it because it is quite technical, but basically there's certain requirements for office buildings that, the size of the building has to require a certain size parking lot, that those requirements don't necessarily make sense for lab spaces. So they kind of reduced the necessary square yard or square footage for parking versus building size. How do things like that, do you think, help the town kind of put out the message that that it's interested in playing ball and working with other companies?
Yeah, so I agree with you. I haven't delved into the technicalities of it. I've read through it a couple of times. It's really a nice feature for the bylaw and the town to do. And you are right, it gives some flexibility to space in the building and some designated zones, I believe, for both life science and lab spaces. So they really, the town, from what I read, has done a really great job of, identifying life science and lab space as something that's desirous to be here. Having said that, and saying that, what that means is, they've shown this real desire to really, I think, be a place, a destination where life science companies will come. And I think by that bylaw change, just even above all the other things that they did with us, having this change in the bylaw, I think really shows the community, or the life science community, we welcome you, and we're looking forward to having people in the community from a life science and lab perspective. That's my take on it. Mass Bio, which is the largest biotech industrial organization, they do surveys of towns, and so they publish things. So I believe that really by doing this, that Burlington continues to show that there's definitely a willingness and a desire to have companies in.
And when a company, such as yours, is looking for a new location, how much do things like that factor in? How much, and also things like, available housing or apartments, and like what are some of the things that you're looking for to make sure that it's not just the cheapest tax rate, but what other things are you looking for to make sure that your employees will be happy where they are or want to be there? Some of the other factors that maybe could be considered.
So there's a lot of factors. So there's business factors, there's commercial factors, there's employee factors. So real quick, so the business factors are what makes sense for us. So does it make sense for us to be someplace, and where do we want to be? I mean, and this obviously makes sense for us because we are just in, and I can be biased with this one, but I think we're in just the very heart of life science, biotech, academia. That just, between Cambridge, Boston, and now really moving out into the 128 belt, there's so many companies. So from a pure business, or where do we want to be perspective, it makes a lot of sense. The commercial side, meaning the business units, how do we make sure they have the right access, so we have great access here in Burlington. Our clients come in here, our teams are able to get here easily. But then, as you asked about the employee side of it, really, again, we looked at the demographics and we said, where do people live? So we do this really large study based on zip codes, and we really do a full range of how people get to work. And we try to pick the spacing that we think works really well. And again, Burlington's a great kind of intersection of a lot of the roads that come in. And I know sometimes in Burlington there's complaints of traffic. We all know that, but I think that's also a testament to the fact that it's a bit of a destination and people come here. So, and then obviously amenities, things. Where can people go? Are we just in a building that's just remote, and what happens, or are they someplace where they can enjoy the space? And I think we all know again where we're located on the summit, easy access to the mall, to 3rd Ave, Middlesex Turnpike, and there's a lot of things to do.
Yeah, you're sort of right in the heart of the whole commercial side of the town. The other, you know, so a lot of the discussion that we've had, you know, in Burlington recently is been a lot of comparisons to, you know, Cambridge as being like sort of the hub. What is it about Boston, Massachusetts in general that you think kind of draws in these companies? Is it the schools? Is it just because which then produces, you know, employees? Is there something about the state that, you know, the way it's set up or the way that the laws are that make it attractive? How come, you know, when they talk about like, you know, the capital of life sciences, one of the things always brought up is, you know, Cambridge, Boston, Massachusetts.
Sure. It's a great question. There's a lot of answers to that, I think. I think in my opinion, I think success begets success, right? So I would absolutely believe that a lot of it started coming out of the academic institutions, you know, Harvard Medical School, MIT, those places that companies wanted to be as close as possible to those things that were going on in academia, but also the access to talent, right? I mean, we haven't really talked about talent and how to attract talent. So people came to attract that talent. Having done that, companies started to grow. After companies grew, you started to get offshoots of companies. So you have smaller biotechs, and then you had the larger, big companies coming in here. And I just believe that it has just become a great space. From a political point of view, I believe for us, from our opinion, Governor Baker and other people have done a great job promoting life sciences in the region, and I really believe that it's a great place to be. The secondary piece of that is, you know, Burlington and the outlying areas. I like to call it the 128 belt. Mm-hmm. If you go back as long as I do, there used to be signs on 128 called America's Technology Highway, which is we used to have a lot of the high tech. It really seems like it's going to be America's life science highway at this point, because, you know, from Waltham all the way up, we have some major companies and spaces for life sciences to be. And I think that also is the fact that, you know, Cambridge and Boston markets are kind of tapped out. I mean, there's not a lot of excess space in those areas, and they're very expensive. So people have continued to kind of move out a bit, but still having that very easy access to Cambridge and Boston.
Right. And I guess there's also, you know, a theory that some of the older employees don't want to necessarily be driving into Cambridge every day, or, you know, let's, you know, get out to the suburbs. It's a little easier to.
I think that's valid.
To get around.
I think it's a very valid statement. Driving downtown is definitely a chore. If you think getting to Burlington's a chore, driving downtown even seems to be worse every day and every month. And I think you know, for us, part of building our campus here in Burlington was to create this collaborative life science center. And I know you've been in the building, and so it's we built it so that it was open and hopefully would attract people to enjoy working there. And I think there is something about not having to drive into the city every day.
I agree. So we talked, you know, a little bit about, you know, how success begets success, as you say. I think that's a true and valid point. What is the benefit, in your opinion, of, you know, having just one area kind of have, you know, becoming like a hub, or having, you know, like having different types of life science companies all sort of concentrated? Does that help, you know, do they sort of like build off each other? What's kind of like the benefit of having, you know, concentration of one type of industry in one area?
Yeah. So I think that there's always just good value, even if it's perceived value, to have a number of companies of the same type. So in this case, life sciences, in a vicinity. I think it just gives more, again, it could be perceived value. I mean, sometimes they don't really work together, but they are there together. And so there's, again, this kind of talent attraction and retention that happens just generally in that space. And then the area gets known to be that space that the life science companies are in. One of our goals here in Burlington was to really help establish that kind of community of life sciences, and our hope is, with, you know, again, the town's been great with the passing of a new bylaw. We hope that attracts other companies to come in also. But we really think that there's you know, strength in numbers kind of is that, you know, you may not interact with the companies, but they're there, and there's a lot of talent in the area, and we're very hopeful that continues.
And looking ahead into the future, I know you're more of the real estate side of things and the science side of things, but where do you see some of the, emerging developments in life science and life science, companies going? Or
Yeah. I can tell you about us personally, again, and I'll do my best to do the science side of it.
Sure, you'll do fine.
But we,
as far as I'm concerned.
but Millipore Sigma is a leader in gene editing. We've got 13 patents in a technique called CRISPR. We just had a patent released here, approved here in the United States. And essentially what CRISPR is in my way of saying it's like a little pair of scissors, or a little, if you remember, like data processing, where you could actually take out text, or you could cut it out a little bit with the scissors. And what this helps us do is it gives our clients access to these tools so they can go in and look at the DNA strands and really try to find and take apart, in my words, the types of disease cells and diseases that happen, and can identify them and can really focus in on them. That's the best I can explain it.
Sure.
I've had it explained to me much better than that. I'm not really sure that I can repeat it, so I won't, but it's some great technology that is really going to really help our clients. And again, our clients are those companies that are out there helping and curing diseases, and we're glad to be partners with them and helping them really solve some of these problems throughout the world.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you talk about businesses, talk about bringing in all these big companies and the benefit to the town, but the real, I guess, mission is actually, when you get down to it, the individual person's health and different things that we can try to cure, as far as these things that plague us as a species. Not to be too dramatic, but
no, but that's a good point.
But that is what we're talking about here. Last thing I wanted to ask you is just as you've said, you had a good experience coming into Burlington, but any suggestions or ideas for as Burlington looks to try to bring in more companies such as like yours, things that they could do, things that could be changed or augmented or improved upon?
That's interesting.
More restaurants?
Yeah, I don't want to say no, because then that's too easy of an answer. No, you're doing everything right. But I really feel, again, I look at our experience, and there were stumbling blocks along the way. There are with any company that's coming into a town. That's just not part of the natural process. But I think, again, there was this willingness from the town to work with us, and we had the same willingness back. I think, again, the bylaw changes again show they show the willingness, and it's promoting the life science companies to come here. We're designating space again, and I know the bylaws has a couple of things to it, but we're designating space where we're creating different or changing the bylaws or creating different ones to really welcome the sciences into the town. And I think that's what a company's looking for. I think a company, at the end of the day, there's a lot of things that the company needs to have to decide where to put a building. Again, we talked about this: employee, business, proximities. But at the end of the day, it has to be a willing town, because you can't really get much done if it's not a willing town. And I think that Burlington has shown a great willingness to just really be a great partner in what we do, and I'm sure with other people too.
All right, very good. Well, that's all the questions that I had.
Well, I appreciate you taking time to sit down with me, and I appreciate being here.
I appreciate you coming in, and I wish you and your company all continued success here in Burlington.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Have a great day.
You too. Well, that gave us all a lot to consider. For the final segment of this month's show, we go now to my discussion with Northeastern professor Jared Auclair about what is going on currently in life sciences and what may the future hold. Let's take a look. I am now joined by Dr. Jared Auclair, Associate Teaching Process and Director at Northeastern University. Doctor, thanks for coming on and joining us here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Pleasure.
So I want to start off with kind of a broad overview, just kind of some of the changes that we've seen maybe in the last, let's say, decade or so in the life sciences. Where have things kind of been as far as trajectory and just new developments?
So this is a great question. And life sciences is ever changing, which is one of the reasons why I love still doing it. And I think that really we're only at the forefront of what we can do in life sciences. And when we think about life sciences, we're generally thinking your biology or your biochemistry, for example, not your chemistry or your hardcore physics. So, over the last 10, 20 years, there was a lot of growth in pharmaceutical products like small molecule drugs and things of this nature. So you could think of aspirin, for example, which is clearly older than 10 or 20 years, but
Sure.
This is an example. So the pharmaceutical industry has developed those and really has what they consider to be blockbuster drugs, or drugs that make billions of dollars a year in revenue for the pharmaceutical company. Over the last 10 or 20 years or so, sort of biotechnology has creeped in and become really more advanced in creating drug products. So when you think about biotechnology, it's sort of, or it is, kind of like using technology to make a drug, but in a more, in an instance where we use living cells to create the drug itself. So, we take cells from Chinese hamster ovary cells and we make antibodies in those cells, purify it, and that's what the drug is. Whereas a small molecule is synthesized using different chemical reactions. So we have less control actually over the process in the biologics, because there's the living cell is making the product, so it can do a whole host of different things that we can't control. Some of it we can. But that's really sort of revolutionized the drug market, and you'll have drugs now, right, like Humira is a prime example of a protein drug that makes billions of dollars. It's really interesting though, because I have a little bit of a jaded view on science. I think that we do a great job right now of treating diseases, with drugs like aspirin or managing symptoms.
Right. Like you mentioned Humira, which is for, it seems like psoriasis and also joint issues.
Correct.
And Crohn's, I think.
That's right.
So anyway.
No, you're exactly right. And I think
so symptoms we get down.
Yeah, we get that. And prevention, vaccines, right? If you think of vaccines, we can treat, we can prevent smallpox. We can prevent chickenpox now. Although I let my kids get chickenpox, so that it's just my preference.
Sure.
The other thing though that's really exciting about where the field's going over the next, I think, starting now, next 5 or 10 years, is really in this new space of advanced therapies, or gene and cell based therapies, where we'll be able to manipulate DNA to actually cure diseases, or we'll be able to take out a patient's cells and create the drug that they need. We'll use the protein as the drug that they need inside of their own cells and put them back into them. And that's an example of that is CAR T cells. And it's really an exciting time, because I think that anybody who's thinking about life science as a profession or something to start getting into, the sky's the limit right now. And the research is cutting edge like I've never seen over my long or short career, depending who you're talking to. So lots of opportunities, and I think that's what's really interesting to me too, right? Like, if you think of Massachusetts and Cambridge is sort of the hub of biotech in the whole world, and maybe some other people would argue with me, but we're in Massachusetts, so we'll go with that.
We're a little biased.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
fine.
That's right.
The Patriots are the best team in the world. So.
6 times. How can you go wrong? And the Red Sox.
Yeah, absolutely.
Aside from that. So we're only at the beginning. Like, things are going to just keep expanding. I think one of the things that's really exciting for me about the life sciences and why I'm not, for example, a business person, because I don't like sitting behind a desk every day. As the life sciences evolve and the research evolves and all the other parts of the business that go with that evolve, we as professionals have to evolve with it, right? We have to learn new things. We have to be able to take some risks and try some new things out and see what we can do. Really, it's all about patient first.
Now, you were saying that there's a possibility that you can actually take somebody's cells, make it so talking about like individualized kind of medicine or individualized therapies. Is that part of what you were talking about? Yeah,
so I think that's something that we're going to see a lot of in the not so distant future, and we're starting to see some of it now. So it's personalized medicine. So we'll take out, for example, they do it with some juvenile cancers right now. They'll take out cells from the person's body. They'll isolate them from the blood. They'll take T cells, which are cells that fight. They're part of your immune system. They fight disease. They'll manipulate them so that they can put them back into your body and they can kill the tumor or the cancer. So I think that the sky's the limit there, and it also gives humanity a really exciting opportunity. So medicine, in my view, is very reactive, right? You go to the doctor when you have a problem. and the doctor tries to diagnose that problem and give you a drug or something to that effect.
Right.
Right. In this sense, we'll able to hopefully be a little more reactive, and if we can develop the diagnostic tools that match the new technologies coming online for drugs, personalized medicine, we'll be able to get in there earlier and treat patients. I think it's going to be an interesting evolution too in personalized medicine, because clearly a lot of the drugs right now are manufactured in huge manufacturing plants all over the world and shipped from the U.S. to Canada and vice versa and all over the world, right?
Right.
A lot of these medicines that are personalized have to be developed and delivered within 12 to 15 hours of isolation of the patient's cells, right? That needs to happen in the hospital, or at least next to the hospital, and that opens a whole nother set of questions, right? Like, how do we ensure that those products that we're taking and putting back are safe?
Right.
And what if we do all the tests on them and we find out that for whatever reason that batch of cells just didn't turn into a good drug? We just took them all from you. Now what are we going to do with them?
Right.
Or do we go back and try again? So there's a whole host of new challenges that are coming, and lots of opportunity. I think if you think about the United States, San Francisco and Massachusetts are the two places where again, we're biased. So in Massachusetts, that's where the epicenter is going to happen, right? Because not only do we have the research centers, we have the biotech companies, we have the hospitals, and those entities all need to coalesce and really drive the innovation. And it needs to be a collaboration with both industry, academia, and government.
Fascinating. I really like the idea of taking somebody's immune system and helping enhance it or give it a kickstart to help fight cancer, as you just alluded to.
Absolutely.
I believe, if I was following along correctly.
No, you got it. Absolutely.
So, getting a little bit more localized, even you're in the Northeastern campus here in Burlington, correct?
Correct.
And what are some of the things that you guys are working on? What's some of the things going on there that people of Burlington might not be aware of?
Yeah, so I think the Innovation Campus in Burlington, Mass. For Northeastern is a really great space, first of all. And people like me who are older don't want to go into Cambridge. The thought of driving into Cambridge actually is like you have to really convince me that it's worth my time.
Sure.
So that's good. But the university itself sees an opportunity here. So my lab in Burlington, on the Burlington campus, is the Biopharmaceutical Analysis Training Lab. We do really three main things there. The first thing is we train local industry to sort of upskill them or reskill them, taking them from understanding how to analyze drugs that are small molecules to analyzing protein drugs. The other thing that I do there is I do my own research. So one of the many projects that we work on is related to Lou Gehrig's disease or Alzheimer's disease, and trying to find therapies for that, which there are none, or there are 2 FDA-approved drugs right now that aren't the best. We also do some research into women's health and how we can really think about, again, to the personalized medicine, right? How men and women are biologically different, and drugs might need to be developed with that in mind, right? Just because I developed this one drug and it's really effective in X, Y, or Z populations, it might not be in A, B, or C, right? And we need to keep those things in mind. So we're looking at different ways that we can take advantage of differences between men and women right now, and what that might look like. The major thing that we do in my lab, though, is we train international national regulatory authorities. So we're committed to regulatory convergence. So right now there's FDAs around the world, or there's the equivalent of the US FDA around the world, and they approve drugs based on their own local needs. There's an international movement, we'll call it, to get regulatory agencies to apply similar rules to approving all drugs for 2 reasons, right? To get drugs to market faster is really the goal, so that patients that need those drugs can get them, right? It would be really awful, especially in a global world, right? Where if, I'm getting the drug I needed in the US because it was approved 3 years ago, but in some other country around the world, it's not been approved because they have extra hurdles, and those patients are all dying because I just can't get the drug right. So we don't want to do that. So I go out and train around the world, but we also bring all those international regulators from places like Malaysia. We've had folks from Korea, Latin America, come to the Burlington campus, and we train them both on the theory of how, if we're looking at biopharmaceutical drugs or protein drugs, what those are, how they work, what they might be doing, and also the practice, right? So we bring them into the lab, really give them some exposure to how the data is collected, so when they're looking at a application for a drug approval, they can understand what they're looking at. and really make it what we consider to be science-based, risk-based assessments as opposed to just trying to apply the most stringent guideline. Another thing that's really exciting though on the Burlington campus is that we have venture capital space for startup companies. So we have a lot of small companies there that are incubating, that have been spun out of other faculty labs in the Boston campus or on the Burlington campus. And there's a really hub there right now for those sort of growing companies. And some of them will fail,
Sure.
but a lot of them is the way of the startup, right? But a number of them will succeed, right? And then they'll leave our Burlington campus and go off and hopefully expand and grow elsewhere in the state.
Now that's good. And it's either a recent thing or a recently expanded thing, right? There's like a new building project that was done over there to give that space for that,
That's right. So we have always had some space for that, but now with the new building that we're building coming online, we'll have more space for that.
Oh, okay, it's still in the works.
That's
okay.
right.
And so you talked about being Cambridge, Massachusetts being a hub. One of the reasons that we're doing this show in general is you were part of the Life Science Forum that the planning department put on. There's a push in Burlington to try to attract more life science companies. What is, in your opinion, is the benefit of having a concentration of different? I mean, I'm sure that everybody's got their own proprietary things that they're working on, but what's the benefit of just having even if they're not sharing everything, being in the same general area, different companies, different research centers?
Yeah, so I think that the concentration of those companies is key to the success of the whole industry, right? And you're right, if you think about it, or if I talk to my parents about what the science industry is like, their perception is, company X doesn't want to talk to company Y because they're going to try to steal our information, and those concerns are real and they exist. But having a hub really fosters collaboration. I think for Massachusetts it's even better, right? Because not only is it the hub of the companies, but you have some of the top universities in the world right here producing the graduates that are needed in the industry. And on top of that, not only in life sciences, but in sort of data analytics and data, right, which is a huge thing in the life sciences that we're having to grapple with now. So having all those resources next to each other just makes it much better for the information to transfer and grow, right? So you can imagine if you have, even if you don't want to share your information from the company perspective, right? You could have joint seminars where you go and you can interact with your colleagues and talk to them about different scientific ideas that you have and really exchange ideas that really helps advance the field, right? I don't think anybody thinks that science can happen in a vacuum. And by having that hub of places right next to each other, that vacuum doesn't exist as much, and we can really drive innovation in the state.
Okay. And is it also helpful to have certain people working on research side, and then medical devices, and having maybe a collaboration between this sort of the drugs and then the delivery system, for example,
Exactly.
or something like that?
No, absolutely. So the medical devices and the drugs and the whole industry having a hub together will be great, especially medical devices with data is a huge need, and I think one that will be really interesting to see what happens in the future. But I think that in general, everything is connected, and the closer it is, the better, right? And and having just in even thinking about it in terms of pockets, right, in different locations, right? You can have a hub in one location and a hub in 20 miles away, right? Those two hubs can interact, but having those two separate hubs together is very powerful.
Yeah. And from your perspective, I mean, you're on the the university side of it. I think Burlington's thinking more along the company, the business side of things right now with some of the changes they're trying to make. But what kind of environment or things do you think the town could do or the business community could do to try to bring in more different medical life science research companies or medical device companies?
So I think that actually Burlington is a really great location for biotech and medical devices and the whole ecosystem, really, especially being on the information superhighway, so to speak. A lot of people come through Burlington to get to where they're going anyway, so they'll also stop here, right? I think that the town's done an amazing job of really creating everything that you would need here to attract people who want to work here, right?
Right.
The mall, there's good hotels, there's restaurants. It's really perfect in that sense. I think what I would say is, if you want to attract more biotech and life science companies, right, to keep an open mind as they sort of start to look around and talk to you and other places about what they're looking for and what they want to do, right? I don't know the intricacies of building development.
Yes,
and I don't,
we don't need to
want
get into bylaw, right?
But I think just keeping it open mind, right? It's an amazing industry, lots of good stuff, good people, very safe. And it really can add to the diversity of the businesses that already exist here, and also collaborate with those businesses that exist here also, right? And I think, you know, and like I said earlier, right, people, as the industry matures and startup companies grow and grow, right, you know, startup companies are great for people who can take a risk and work in them, which tends to be people right out of college.
Right.
As those mature and those people grow up and get married and have kids, and you know, the thought of commuting into Boston, which I do on occasion, it takes me an hour and a half from my house, right? The thought of doing that is a lot, and
right.
having other options would be great. And I think that, you know, I know that the Sigma Millipore, right, is in Burlington,
yes.
and I know that, you know, we talk to them about these advanced therapies in this space that we talk about. So I think there's lots of opportunity here for growth and really some exciting things to happen. And I mean, I think too, what the life sciences can bring to the community, right, is, you know, a lot of the people in every industry, but in life sciences too, want to give back, right? So you could imagine even Burlington High School students taking advantage of the industry being here and, you know, guest speakers or field trips or what have you.
Yeah, I know that when, you know, Millipore Sigma did do their opening, they had a little lab for the kids that was set up and some, you know, things like that. And I think knowing this school system, I'm sure they would love to try to, you know, give any opportunity to the students here to learn more. So, all right, so we touched on, you know, the main thrust of what's going on here in Burlington, you know, about attracting new things. So I kind of want to get into just a little bit back into the science side of things a little bit, just because I am fascinated, and I think there's a lot going on that most of our viewers wouldn't have any idea about. So, you know, as you're looking around or, you know, collaborating with other people or just reading research, what are some of the real exciting things that you see either, you know, in the works or possibly, you know, a few years down the line?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of things, and some of them we talked about, right? So CAR T cells, it's a chimeric T cell application, right? Which I described about taking your cells out and manipulating them to fight cancer, right? That type of technology will only grow and be more applicable to different diseases. Gene editing, so having a gene creates a protein, and oftentimes the protein's function lets it do something in your body, right? And if you have a gene that's deformed or has, you could think about it like reading a sentence and there's wrong words in the sentence, right? If there's wrong pieces of the DNA and it makes the wrong product, right, then you could get sick and die or have to be on permanent treatment, right? We can now sort of edit out pieces of the DNA and put in the right stuff, the right DNA, to really advance and essentially cure whatever that genetic disease might be. And when I talk about DNA and genetic diseases, right, those are hereditary diseases that are linked to genes, and people can think about things like there's some evidence that Alzheimer's has some genetic links, right, and other diseases like that. So we might be able to do that in the future. And I think those are the two most really exciting sort of fields: gene editing, gene therapy, and cell therapy, right? You could also imagine, right, if you have a gene that's doing the wrong thing, we can take a synthetic gene that we make in the lab and inject it into someone, and it'll correct the error that's happening.
Really, it'll, however,
find
and match up with
basically, yeah. I mean, one of the other really cool things that was actually discovered, so I went to graduate school at UMass Medical School, and RNA interference was discovered there. And that's taking small pieces of RNA, which is a type of nucleic acid, similar DNA, and you can take a small chunk of it and have it target a specific match in the body, and then cause it to degrade, right? So you can get rid of bad stuff from you. And they're looking at doing this with many diseases, and lots of those companies are in the state.
So the big takeaway, guess, because you mentioned early on, is, you know, we have medicine up until now has been a lot of treating the symptoms, and you're thinking, looking ahead, that we actually might be able to cure things in a way that we haven't until now.
I think you're absolutely right. So I think that this is a time that humanity can really exactly start to cure diseases. I mean, like I said, I'm jaded, right? But that's not to say that the medical advances that we've made aren't massive, right? If you think about the history of modern medicine, we're only thinking back to, the early 1900s when my grandparents were alive, right?
Right.
So that's not that long ago. So just getting this far in this short of period, it's like thinking about the computer, right? Like I was watching something on TV with an Apple II GS, and that was in, the 80s when I was in elementary school. It's sort of the same sort of progression. I mean, the computer moved a lot faster than science did, but it's similar type of speed.
Right. As things kind of build on themselves, they just kind of get more and more advanced. And suddenly you have an iPhone or a smartphone in your pocket where.
That's right.
20 years ago that was science fiction.
That's right. Well, it's really interesting too, right? Because pretty soon your smartphone, well, not pretty soon, your smartphone essentially is already a medical device, right? Your health app can monitor how many steps you took.
Mm-hmm.
You can look at, sometimes you can look at heart rate, things like that, right? You can watch on TV, right? You can buy they're like fingerprint machines that go on the back of your phone that take your EKG, right, for your heart rate.
Right.
So moving forward, your cell phone or your smartwatch will be a medical device that will probably be used more readily for diagnostic, right? Like, there's symptoms that could happen before a heart attack, right? And maybe your smartphone can detect those, or if you're wearing an Apple Watch or a smartwatch, it could detect that early, right? And then, ping, could notify you, but it could also ping the doctor, right? You could imagine, you could imagine, and this is a whole other dilemma of privacy that is for another day, but
sure.
You could imagine your phone sending all of your information to your doctor in real time so that, we could really think about like, oh, okay, this is what's happening. We need to get him to the hospital, or this is what we need to treat, come in tomorrow or whatever. But
yeah, that'd be an interesting conversation. Your phone you're having a stressful day, your phone rings and your doctor calls you and says, hey, you got to come in and treat that heart attack you're about to have.
No, right, it's true. It's true, right? And well, things like heart attacks, right? There's a window of treatment, right? So if you can get early detection, right, then
yeah. I mean,
great.
Anything to help us stay healthy.
But it's really cool too if you think about it, right? Like gene therapy and smart watches and all those things. Like, when I was growing up in the 90s, I would have never thought of any of those things, right? So it just makes me wonder, right, what really is going to come.
Right.
I can predict what I see now that's going to happen in the next 10 or 20 years, but what are the things that I can't even think about?
Right, exactly.
There's a lot of smart people around the world working on those things. So.
All right. Well, that was very interesting. I like the, look at the future with through all this science and development going on. I think it is hopeful.
It is hopeful. It's a good time to be alive.
And let's get more of it right here in Burlington.
Yeah.
All right. Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your time and your thoughts with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And good luck with the research.
Thanks.
So there you have it, a deep dive in modern-day life sciences and what may be in store for the future. I'd like to thank my guests, Dr. Ed Weiner of the Board of Health, Millipore Sigma's Paul Asmar, and Northeastern University Professor Jared Auclair. I'd also like to thank all of you for watching. We will be back next month with another edition of BNEWS In Depth, and we hope to see you then.